So, the Grammys are a joke.
The 29th Annual Grammy Award.
They've always been a joke. Me being so obvious to point out that the Grammys are a joke makes me kind of a joke. No one on earth sees a Grammy as any indicator of quality, and I say that even as we're coming off of fairly decent Grammys where the winners are mostly unobjectionable. And nowhere does the Grammys seem to get it wrong more often than the Best New Artist Grammy, which all too frequently seems to go to flame-outs, flash in the pans, and all around just forgotten footnotes in music history. It's the Madden curse of music. And since we're just coming off of music's big night, I thought we'd check out one of its more notable victims.
When I was walking in Memphis.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Marc Cohn, writer and performer of the enduring semi-classic Walking in Memphis. At the 1992 Grammys, Marc Cohn won the prestigious Best New Artist Award.
And the Grammy goes to Marc Cohn.
Yes, Cohn was apparently better than all the other acts that debuted in '91, including Pearl Jam, Cypress Hill, and Tupac Shakur, none of whom were even nominated. I'll give him this, of the nominees, Cohn was probably a better pick than Color Me Bad or CNC Music Factory.
Put on my blue suede shoes.
But for a guy who's most often noted as an example of the Grammys screwing it up again, his biggest and only hit, Walking in Memphis, has held up incredibly well, including tons of covers and radio play to this day. When adult alternative came around, most of the easy listening garbage that polluted the early 90s got rightfully swept under the rug, but Walking in Memphis was strong enough that we actually decided to keep it around.
Walking in Memphis.
So if Walking in Memphis was good enough to survive that purge, you'd think its songwriter could have capitalized on that and kept it going. But instead, the only time people even bring him up is to attack the Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. Shouldn't this man have some other legacy? And do you really feel the way you feel? Deep, man.
She said, tell me, are you a Christian child? And I said, ma'am, I am tonight.
Okay, I'll be honest. He didn't release anything before Walking in Memphis, so I got close to nothing here. Let me see. Marc Cohn was born in Cleveland. He liked a lot of 70s singer-songwriters like Van Morrison and Cat Stevens. He was a session musician for Tracy Chapman. He performed at Caroline Kennedy's wedding, and he was on a rock album re-recording of songs from the musical Starlight Express.
Here comes a diesel train with a steel refrain. Hear me knocking.
The hell am I looking at? Well, anyway, let's get to the good stuff. That pretty piano riff that opens Walking in Memphis is actually really easy to play. Very easy pattern, basic chords, no black keys. It is shockingly simple to learn. There is basically no easier piano riff in the universe. Chopsticks is harder than the riff from Walking in Memphis. Heart and Soul may as well be Beethoven's 29th Sonata compared to Walking in Memphis. And yet it sounds great, doesn't it?
Put on my blue suede shoes and I boarded the plane.
Anyway, Marc Cohn describes Walking in Memphis as a pretty literal story about a visit he had to Memphis back in the 80s.
W.C. Handy, won't you look down over me?
Now, if you're not up on your music history, Walking in Memphis might need some footnotes. Suffice to say that Memphis has a gigantic legacy as far as popular music goes, and Cohn name-checks pretty much every single bit of it. It's like the "we didn't start the fire" of Memphis music. To sum it all up, Memphis' famous Beale Street is where W.C. Handy and his proteges invented and popularized the blues. It was where Sam Phillips opened Sun Records and discovered Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Elvis Presley, and it's where Elvis decided to build his own personal mansion, Graceland. It's where the legendary Stax Records made some of the greatest music of the 60s. It's where Al Green and Willie Mitchell invented Memphis Soul in the 70s, and where Green still lives and works as a reverend making gospel records. Truly just a profoundly important part of American music, and it's hard not to feel a profound sense of spiritual uplift when you hear music from the great city of Memphis.
They call me the juice when I'm at the strip club. I put down 100 order. It don't matter to a player, I'm a stud. Cause when I leave the club, I'm a fuck.
That came out after Walking in Memphis, but I'm sure Cohn finds it just as inspiring.
Saw the ghost of Elvis.
Now, I've never been to Memphis personally. The closest I got was watching Hustle and Flow, which made it kind of look like a shithole, but you definitely get the opposite impression from this song.
Was walking with my feet 10 feet off a Beale.
Now, I do know someone who's been there, and they said they went to Beale Street, and it's actually pretty great. Like, one of the few tourist traps worth visiting. Really, this song is basically a super effective Memphis tourism ad. Take a vacation in Memphis. Walk out on the street with an open cup of beer. It's awesome drinking in Memphis. And don't go anywhere else except Beale Street because there's nothing else there. At least that's what I was told.
Boy, you got a prayer in Memphis.
Cohn also says that this song is in some ways about his complicated feelings about religion, which is what this whole gospel part is about.
Muriel plays piano every Friday at the Hollywood. She said, tell me, are you a Christian child? And I said,
Well, Muriel, here's a hint.
I said, ma'am, I am tonight.
Actually, from what I can tell, Cohn is kind of agnostic, but at that moment in Memphis, Tennessee, he felt touched by God, or by Elvis, I don't know, same thing I guess.
Walking in Memphis.
Yet, despite feeling something apparently very powerful, he doesn't know if this is a feeling that means anything or is going to last.
But do I really feel the way I feel?
If it's fleeting, he just wants to preserve the moment.
Reverend Green, be glad to see you.
And honestly, for me, it's the gospel stuff that really puts Walking in Memphis over the top for me. Without it, let's face it, Walking in Memphis would be one of the whiter songs ever written about black music. The gospel choir is what pulls it in the realm of true greatness. Otherwise, it would have been maybe a little too polished for what he's talking about, like that part about Elvis's ghost.
They just hovered around his tomb. There's a pretty little thing waiting for the king down in the jungle room.
Yes, Elvis is still having skeevy groupie sex in the afterlife. She's probably underage, too.
You haven't got a prayer.
Walking in Memphis is basically everything the Grammys love. It's tasteful, thoughtful, serious, deeply in tribute to the classics, and it doesn't really push any boundaries. Most of that basically applies to the Daft Punk album that won all the awards this year, and I say that as a huge fan. The biggest surprise to me is that Cohn only got just the one Grammy. Of course, that year all the awards went to Natalie Cole singing Nat King Cole, which is basically a perfect storm of Grammy pandering that we'll never see again. And certainly Marc Cohn never himself came close to this level of popularity again, and I can tell you why. Marc Cohn's debut album had 2 more singles off of it, and they both only scraped the bottom of the genre charts. This is the first one, Silver Thunderbird. It's about his dad and his dad's beloved T-Bird.
Don't you give me no Buick. Son, you must take my word. If there's a God in heaven, he's got a silver Thunderbird.
Okay, I'm from a different generation than Mark's dad, and I'm not a car person to begin with. All I can say is, from my eyes, that is the butt ugliest car I've ever seen in my life.
Keep your Eldorados. You can't take and the foreign cars absurd.
Foreign cars are absurd. So, this Mercedes looks stupider to you than this thing that's roughly the size and shape of the Wienermobile.
Down the road in the rain and snow.
Also, I'm not sure I agree with how soft-edged this song is. I realize Silver Thunderbird is also about Mark's late father, so some somberness was always going to creep into it, but it's a silly premise for a song, and he clearly knows it.
Great big fins and painted steel. Man, it looked just like the Batmobile.
I mean, compare it to how Springsteen sings about classic cars. He could have stood to liven it up a little, is all I'm saying. Now, the other song was even more low-key, a love ballad called True Companion, which was clearly meant as like a wedding song.
Then I'll take you home, and with wild abandon, make love to you just like a true companion.
Maybe I'm alone in this, but true companion and make love don't seem like they belong in the same sentence. True companion is what people call their dog.
I will always be in love with you.
Listening to these songs, it's really clear why Marc Cohn's career didn't survive and thrive. He was just too slick, and the adult alternative scene kind of swept him away. He was out-rocked by Sheryl Crow, for God's sake.
My songs seem to come across in a much more real, organic way live than they do on record. I haven't quite figured that out.
And yes, plenty of artists were successful being even less edgy, but Cohn backs up his super easy listening music with thoughtful lyrics that are meant to be taken seriously, and that's a really difficult tightrope to walk, you know? Like, Don Henley managed it, I guess, and Bruce Hornsby did it to an extent, but not many others. Now, your Phil Collinses and your Bryan Adamses and your Richard Marxes, they were legit songwriters too, but they didn't worry themselves so much with being heartfelt or respectable like Cohn did. That's why they were way more successful. Marc Cohn probably didn't have a Sussudio in him. Not that that's really a bad thing. He's released a few more albums over the course of his career, which you can look up if this interests you at all. And you can tell what kind of music he was trying to make by looking at some of the other more famous names that he worked with. David Crosby, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, old school stuff from the glory years of singer-songwriting. I mean, look, here's a song to his unborn kid.
Will you laugh just like your mother? Will you sigh like your old man?
Yeah, it's very middle-aged music he writes. Now, I don't want to make it sound like all he did was softer than soft. He was capable of grittier music. A lot of his stuff sounds like Clapton. Not 60s guitar legend Clapton, obviously. I mean, like unplugged 90s Clapton. But even light rock is more rock than True Companion. Or take this one. This one's got kind of a rockish edge to it.
I might lose you in the canyon, then you went riding up the coast.
Okay, that's clearly Tom Petty. That's Tom Petty, right? I mean, that's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I don't hear Marc Cohn anywhere else on this. This has to be Tom Petty. Oh, I almost forgot to mention also, back in 2005, he got carjacked and he got shot in the head. And he survived, with only minor injuries. Yeah. So I guess he did have a prayer in Memphis. Look, if your tastes run towards easy listening light rock, you could certainly do worse.
Walking in Memphis.
I saw one writer describe Marc Cohn as the last singer-songwriter, which sounds about right. He would probably have a much better reputation if he'd started in the 70s. He's probably the last of his kind to slip through into popular consciousness before that window closed. There is still a market for this kind of music, of course, just not really in the mainstream pop sphere. More like at Starbucks and Barnes & Noble, and I don't even know if they were even selling music when Cohn first started. And he's still recording today, by the way, including a covers album just a couple years ago. Marc Cohn probably did not deserve to be called the best debut of 1991, but he wasn't a bad artist by any means, just too tasteful. And Walking in Memphis. Who doesn't like Walking in Memphis? Go Grizzlies.